Hey guys, I am really excited about today's episode because I am bringing to you one of my good friends, Bart Miller, who is also known as the Billion Dollar Cowboy, because he's got so much knowledge that he learned growing up that applied to his life, his finances, his business, everything across the board. And he is spilling everything in today's rodeo. We're going to have Bart Miller in the Crazy Blessed podcast. All right, Bart, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and all of my amazing guests. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I am so excited to be here. I haven't been on a podcast now for like 3 weeks, so whoa, am I stoked to be here.
That is wonderful. Now, I got to give a little backstory. I didn't mention this in the intro, but I met you totally because I wanted to find out how to pull some style together.
There you go.
And that was so funny. So it's like, oh, you need to meet Bart, the Billion Dollar Cowboy. I'm like, whoa, wait, who, what?
Right.
They're like, you need to meet him. He's got this marriage program. He's also helps people with their style. I'm like, I have no style. So yes, I need this man. So it was wonderful. But what I found about you, and as we talked, so multifaceted, just following your passion. And I want you to share your story, but also share what's behind this Billion Dollar Cowboy.
Sure. Yeah.
Who is that? Yeah. Share that with us. Like, tell us your story.
All right. Well, let's clear one thing up. You've got plenty of style, but I do have fun. I do have fun talking style, and it's an interesting way on how a cowboy that clear up till he's junior till I was a junior in high school was the first year I got really into heavy fashion.
Yeah.
And most people don't know that, but I wore a cowboy hat and a pair of Wranglers until then. So that's a story in itself of how I got into fashion, but there you go. So my story, and I'm assuming we can talk about God in here and people aren't going to.
Oh, if we don't talk about God, we're missing out on everything.
All right.
Like, yes,
so,
we're all big in the Jesus thing.
All right, good. That's good. So that's an important part. So the one thing that I realized when I was very young, I come from a broken home. Still to this day, I talk very little to my mother and my father. It's rare that we talk, so we don't talk a lot. Not because we don't like each other, but there was a time period in my life I didn't talk to my mom for over 6 years.
Wow.
I was pretty much raised by my grandma. Now, my other siblings, different story a little bit for them, but for me, that was kind of how it went. And grandma had a lot of different beliefs, right? So she was a very hard worker. Grandpa owned a farm, so I was raised on a farm. And grandma was the one that, as a side note back then, not saying women had a different role than they do today or men had a different role, but it was a little different for grandma. Grandma's role was she was the take care of everything in the house. I never missed a meal. She always washed my clothes, always made my bed. But there was rules for me that I never didn't feed horses. Didn't matter sick, didn't matter how bad it was, the weather was. I fed horses, cows. I made sure stuff was taken care of outside. Like that was no questions asked, right? She took care of this. I took care of that. We had an old coal stove that's how was heated. We had linoleum floors. We had a working outhouse. And so we lived in Idaho. So we didn't have much. Like we were I'm not saying I ever missed a meal because I didn't.
Right.
We were frugal, and grandma was very frugal, right? She came from that generation. You don't throw anything away.
Yeah.
But she really taught me that buy once, don't buy twice. So look at value, but buy once. If you have to save for another 3 months to get the right thing, save for 3 more months. Don't just go buy to get yourself by.
That's good.
Which was like a real insightful thing for me. So she didn't always look at the most expensive was the best. She did her research. But whatever she felt like was the optimal thing to buy, she would do whatever it took to get there. And she wouldn't settle, right? It wasn't about settling. It was like, here's what we need. So those principles, I would watch her and I would talk to her. I'd say, Grandma, I said, you never had a lot. And she'd look at me and she says, oh, I have everything.
So good. Perspective, right?
Yeah. And I mean, what do you mean by that, Grandma? Like I look and other people have these bigger houses. She goes, well, when I was a little girl, I bathed in a bucket and we had no electricity and My dad was scared to death of electricity when it came out, so we couldn't have it.
Yeah.
And she told me all these stories, and she goes, "So what I have today, I feel like a millionaire." And I was
So
like,
good.
"Wow, that's so good, right?" So I started to learn these things, but Grandma was always like, "Bart, let me teach you something." She goes, "Let me teach you something Grandpa wouldn't do." And I'm like, "Okay, what's that?" She goes, "Anytime you want to learn something, you need to go find amazing people to teach you the trade. Like, you
Wow.
need to go learn that."
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay." So there was a neighbor, and he was a really amazing entrepreneur, and happened to be a relative. And she's like, "Why don't you go work? See if he's just got work to do. Even if you work for free, just go ask him, learn some things."
What a
And
smart woman. I'm
yeah,
sorry,
he
but
really was.
she is brilliant.
He was brilliant. Yeah. And so I did that, and his name was Joe Treasure. And Joe said, "Hey, you know what? I would love to have you help me on these different projects." And he was in the construction space, but he also was into politics. So, long story short, I started working with him. He paid me way too much money. Let me be clear. Like, he was like so generous. And I was like, here's people are talking, I remember people saying that the wealthy weren't generous. They didn't
Right.
want to help. They didn't want, and I was like, well, this man pays a huge tithing.
Yeah.
He does serves the church like crazy.
Yeah.
And here I am. He knows where I come from, right? And he's my relative, but he's paying me pretty handsomely. Let's be clear for who I am.
So
And I don't know if you know, but back in a lot of the farms here, they have big fuel tanks. And so the fuel tanks back then didn't have locks on them, because we just trusted everybody that, you're not going to come steal
right,
fuel, right?
right.
But he would give me unlimited access to fuel, which today I'd be like dying, right? Because the price of fuel compared to back then.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, that was a big deal. And I'm telling you this backstory so that people can get a vision of where I came from, right?
Right.
Because if you don't understand that it's possible for you, then nothing's possible, right?
That's
So,
impossible.
right. So I got a glimpse of things that I was like, wow, this is amazing. Life can be different than it is, right?
It can be
And
different.
it can be. So, and he started teaching me principles. Like, he would show me different things, that
Right.
why and how he invested, and why he bid things, and how he bid them, and how there was profit, and all these kind of things that I was just like, I had no idea, because my dad was a school teacher,
Yeah.
and he was a driver's ed teacher. So he would get up, he would teach school, and then he would get right into his driver's ed stuff, right? And so it was just like this amazing thing that I was just like, holy cow, what do I do? And
It's
so
almost like Rich Dad Poor Dad.
kind of,
You
kind
know,
of like
where
that.
it's like,
Yeah.
here's how the rich handle their money and their
Yep.
resources, and here's how the poor. And it's
Yeah.
you're right. It's like a totally different way of seeing things.
It was
Totally new.
really, and my dad would get really frustrated with the things that I wanted to do. Not that he was a bad man in any way, shape,
Oh,
or form.
right.
He would
Yeah, of
like,
course.
he would get frustrated on certain things, and then and rightfully so. Back then I could see his mindset, and he could, anyway, long story short, so I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, because I saw what Joe had done. So at that point, none of my other siblings wanted to do that, but I did. I was like, this is what I want to do when I get older. And so then I started to work for other people, and I was like, I am not good at working for people. I'm
You're
really bad.
unemployable.
Yeah, I'm not really good at that. And then I also learned that I was if I was a C student, I was happy, and I was damn lucky to be a C student. So I got to college, and I was like, college isn't good for me. So I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm this lost misfit,
Yeah.
And so I was approached because there was an old guy in the Western space that was like, I think you should come and sell cowboy boots and saddles for me. You'd be good at that. You'd be good at the sales. And I'd learned from Joe that, you know what, if I could do that, and he said, I'll pay you commission, straight commission. I was like, hey, that's entrepreneurial. I'll do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did. Was super successful at it. I sold a guy a pair of boots that owned a big furniture company. So he hired me into that. Long story short, that's how my career started. Then I owned
Yeah.
real estate companies. I've owned mortgage companies. I've been in the reformulated fuel lubrication business. And now I'm in the internet marketing space, and have been for the last 15 years. And grown, just growing my empire, I would say, from that, and my knowledge from that. So I have a real interesting background from corporate, because I've run corporate companies and built them and consulted them, to the online space from building that. So I've got both worlds that I can use together to do that. But that's kind of my background and my story. So came from nothing. So I understand that. Still not afraid to go back to that,
Right.
to right now where I have been super blessed.
Yeah, super blessed. And this idea of the $1 billion cowboy, I love this, because we were talking about it earlier. It's like you
Yeah.
kind of just fell into this idea, like people started calling you the $1 billion cowboy because you were in the rodeo space. And then you would show up with like the best attire and the Louis Vuittons and like everything was just top notch. So you started getting this nickname, the $1 billion cowboy.
Yeah.
And I think some people look at that and they're like, oh, that's untouchable. Like that is like that success. Those are for the few.
Right.
And far between. Those who God puts like sprinkles pixie dust on and sets them apart. But this idea that, it's not like some secret that people are talking about behind closed doors. This is just basic. Like when you abide by the principles that God lays out for managing resources, for, like you even said, it's for generosity, for giving, we become just a conduit of his blessing.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I will tell you that 90% of the problem that I see today is mindset, number one.
Totally.
And then the thing I find that people, and this is something if I coach somebody, and I coach a lot of people, praise the Lord, like that I do. I coach some amazing top internet marketers. And I also take on little, some other people that I coach. The one thing that everybody seems to struggle with, right, is they have money blocks. And I tell them it's not a money block. They call it a money block. But what I tell them, it's a vision block. And the reason I say that is because if you can't see it, you're going to finish this. If you can't see it, you can't
be it. You can't have it. You can't.
Right? We hear that all the time, right? You never hear if you can't touch the money, if you can't see it. So what people don't realize, and this is a really key thing that I coach on, is we see in pictures.
Yes.
We don't see in money.
Talk about
so
that.
We relate everything back to money, but really what you want to be thinking about is, and that's why people tell you to create a vision board, but people don't do it. They write down things, but they don't see the pictures of the vision board. So what happens is I can't get it in here because I can't see it. Now, the other thing that they don't do, and this is really, really interesting, is they don't take the end goal and then break it down clear to the day. So let's say hypothetically that we wanted to make, let's say this year we want to make $1 million.
Right.
Okay. So what you and I would do is I would say, okay, $1 million. All right. Let's say for $1 million, what does that break down to that we have to make as an hourly rate? Okay. Now, once I understand what it has to make as an hourly rate, what do we have as assets that we can plug in that can make us that hourly rate to make that work?
Right.
And when you start to think of it from the top down, all of a sudden you can say, well, hey, Bart, if we built this type of program and we had 50 people in this program, and then all of a sudden we did this program, or our mind can see it, see? Yeah. All of a sudden we got the whole picture in front of us of, well, this, and then all of a sudden at the end we go, $1 million is obtainable for us.
Yeah. It's actually not in some far-off fairyland. Like this is actually just a series of broken down goals. And speaking about the vision, like having that vision before you, I have a vision board in my office. And it's so funny because when that vision becomes so clear to you, when you hit it, it's like, I saw it the whole time. I don't know if you've experienced that. Like I remember the first time, like I would put, when I started, I would put just like a 6-figure number. I'd never seen 6 figures in my account. Ever. And I remember putting a 6-figure up there and not just getting comfortable seeing that number. And then logging in one day to my bank account and seeing 6 figures, it was like, oh yeah. Like it almost sounds deflating, but I had seen it so clearly that when it showed up, same thing, setting a goal to make 7 figures. And then when I get my accountant's report and there it is, it's like, oh yeah, okay. And it sounds unrealistic to a lot of people, but it actually, the more you familiarize yourself and get comfortable with that vision of what does that represent to you? What does it look like to you? And then your mind starts filtering everything according to that vision you have.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to break down those goals, like you said.
Yeah. And this is it. And a funny place where this comes from, line upon line.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
You have to build line upon line to get where we want to get.
Yeah.
And then I tell this to even my son, my youngest boy. For him, making $100 is a big deal,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like, whoa, $100.
Yeah.
But after you've made your first $100 3 or 4 times, is it such a big deal?
Right.
But
Right.
why? What's the difference? I mean, come on. It's because I'm more advanced. I'm more okay. So if you're always growing, and here's a little spiritual thing for you, but if you're always growing, then, and the one thing I believe, the only thing you take when you die from this earth isn't this body,
Right.
it's knowledge. We
Yeah.
came down here to gain further light and knowledge.
Yeah.
Therefore, if we take knowledge with us and we're always growing, then everything in our empire should grow.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If we look at the leaders in the Bible and we start to study the Bible, if you look at the most wealthy man ever in the Bible, Solomon, I would say, would be, I
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but how did he do it? Well, he looked and he saw his father-in-law before he ever got married. He looked at what he did. He knew if he made alliances, I'll go look at all the principles that he did to create the wealth, right? It was an empire, but he did it all through line upon line, but watching and mentoring and studying the things that had worked.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And he made the right things. But anyway, so in my life, that's what I've really tried to do. And I've always said, it's not that you can never deviate. It's not like if I go from here right now, I drove to New York City, there's a million paths to get there.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'd like to take the shortest one. Let's be clear.
Right. Right.
But there's a million paths along the way. And I'll tell you one other short story that may help or may not help your viewers. But let's just see, 3 months ago, for instance, well, it's been a little longer than that. I've had a few things in my business that have just been horrific. I mean, it's been bad things that just happened, right? And when that happens, for some reason, if I'm transparent with you, I get really pissed off at God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm like, listen, I mean, I'm supporting this. I've paid this. I serve you. I love you. Why? Like, why are you, like, come on,
Yeah.
and I get really pretty angry about it. I'm not gonna, like, it just gets to the point where I'm like, Lord, come on, have a little mercy. Like, I'm doing everything, I want the sprinkles like everybody else wants, just give me the sprinkles. So anyway, I was reading this book and I was going through it and it said this, and this was just like this aha moment, one of those when the Lord, is ready to kick your ass. And so he does it.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there.
That happens on the daily, Bart. So.
Yeah. Well, this one was a bigger one. This is a real knock upside the head. Anyway, so I was sitting there reading this book, and it said, hey, have you ever had struggles in life? And if you have, how many struggles you have? So I know you can go through this with me. So I started to write these struggles down, right? And then it said, every struggle you've had in your life, as you're going through it, have you become better?
Wow.
After the struggle. And I was like,
totally.
I have.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it walked through this process. So if you've become better with struggles in your life,
right,
then why wouldn't you want more struggles? And you should be grateful for these struggles. And I was like, yeah, I get that. Then all of a sudden, my fitness coach called me.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, you're hitting your goals, but you can do better. Like, I demand more out of you. And I'm like, dude, that's exactly what I pay you for. Like, you better be kicking my ass to become the best I can possibly be, because that's what I'm paying you for.
Right.
And then all of a sudden the Lord says, you don't pay me, but I do it.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
I literally fell to my knees and
Wow.
had tears in my eyes. And I said, Heavenly Father,
Forgive me.
you have been that mentor. You have been putting me through the pain that I'm paying others. I'm paying them to do this to me. And I'm demanding them to get excellence out of me.
Right.
And here you are demanding excellence for me. And I am pissed at you. I am so irate at you that I can't even stand it, when reality is you're carrying me to become what I've demanded of everybody else, to become the best me I can possibly be. And I'm mad. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Like, mind blowing.
So good.
So frustrated. I was like, Heavenly Father, please forgive me. Like, I am so sorry. Like, I did not see this earlier. I mean, so all of a sudden this whole trial was like, yes,
absolutely.
I'm going to kick this right in the trash. And the Lord is teaching me how to do it, right? He is like mentoring me through it. So we've got to get rid of this gutter in our minds that the Lord, he's sprinkling me, but I'm literally pissed because he is.
Yeah. And we have this idea that we should be exempt from pain.
Right.
And when pain is exactly why we go to the gym. We don't understand this because we want the blessing, but what we need to realize is blessing will crush you if you haven't built up the muscles to carry it.
Amen.
And how God does that is through, okay, how are we going to handle this situation? How are you going to seek me? What are you going to learn? What are you going to gain? All of these steps are just doing reps in the spiritual gym so that when the blessing comes, we can manage the blessing. We can actually carry it and get more. And so this idea that we should not experience pain, where did we get that from?
Right.
Because Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, but take joy. It can't do you in. It's just going to grow you. That's why we can take joy. Not that we shouldn't experience it, but we can experience it and grow.
And let's be clear, he experienced plenty of pain here.
Oh yeah, absolutely, plenty of it.
Right?
That is so true. That is so true. We're not exempt from that.
Yeah. So the number one motivator in life, and I use it all the time, is pain outweighs pleasure, and you'll win. And I know that people hate to hear that, and they think of it as actual, like I've got to put myself. It's not that.
No.
The pain of whatever happens has to outweigh the pleasure, or we don't take action. So an example of this is, and my wife's seen me do this a lot. So she was like wanting to get off of sugar because she had a sugar addiction that was driving her crazy, right? So she comes to me, she says, honey, I've wrote a contract up with you, and this is the contract. We're going to Disney World in 3 months. If I consume sugar, then I no longer can go on the trip, and I'll sign that with you. So I signed a deal with her, right? But the pain of not being on the trip with our entire family in Disney World far outweighed the pleasure for her of having sugar.
Totally.
So do you think she hit her goal?
Absolutely.
Right? So if we understand that, then all of a sudden principles become easier for us. But the hard part for us is we don't want to put those contracts in place, because then we have to hold up to them.
Then we have to hold up to them. Yes,
That's
you're
right.
absolutely right.
And so here's another interesting story that's caused me a lot of success that I've never shared ever on a podcast. I've only shared this in a lot of private things, but I'll share it with you because I think it's a really, the Lord's telling me this is a good thing for us. So I'm going to tell you. So I'm a Latter-day Saint. So that's the religion I come back from. And we have these temples that we go to. And to be able to get in the temple, you have to go through a process to be able to have what's called a temple recommend. And that's very important, and it's a deal. And we go in there and we make covenants and all this kind of stuff in the temple. So stay with me through this story. But what happened is the first time I ever attended the temple, I walked in, and it is undeniable. One of the beautifulest things you'll ever do. It's so pretty to walk in there, right? So I walk in, I get in there, and when you get in there, you change clothes. And what you change into is an all white, beautiful outfit so that you look very similar. That's beside the point. But what happened is I noticed that there was lockers with keys on them. And I became extremely angry because I was like, we're in the most holy place on planet Earth. If somebody steals in here, like, come on, are you freaking kidding me? Why do I need a locker with a key on it?
Yeah.
Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was pissed.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're in the holiest place we could be.
Yeah.
Come on, right? So I was pissed. I'm like, this just makes no sense to me. So anyway, we start through everything. Well, we get to meet what's called the temple president, which is over the temple and the region and stuff like that. So he goes, hey, does anybody have any questions? And I'm like, pick me. Like, pick me. I'm right here. Whoa,
Yeah.
And he does. And he goes, well, what's the problem? And I said, hey, look, we're in the most spiritual place on planet Earth, right? All these things we've been taught since we were kids. I've looked forward to this moment my whole life. Here I am. And there's lockers with keys on them. He goes, oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. Like, you are? Yeah. I'm like, okay, why? He goes, this is the thing that we miss out in life. And this is where I really got the blessing.
Wow.
This is what we miss out in life on. He goes, we don't put lockers in our life. So let me tell you what that means. I said, okay, what's that? He goes, it's not that you have the temptation to steal. We all have different temptations, though. What if somebody else has that temptation and they can't even be tempted? Isn't it ideal that they can't even be tempted in their life? I said, yeah. He goes, now what I want you to think about, what is the one thing that's your temptation, and put a locker in your life. Go tell somebody else that this is your temptation and to lock it out of your way, and see if that doesn't help you be more successful in your life. And don't worry about the locker in the temple. Worry about that the locker makes somebody else safer than when they walked in here because they have no temptation. We've put it in place for them. And it was like a real, like, mind-blowing thing for me as a young man at that point. And I thought, you know what? I need to create lockers in my life with the things that I struggle with, whatever addictions, and make sure that I've got those locked up and I can't get to them, so I'm not tempted by them.
Yeah.
And that'll help me be more successful as a dad, as a father, as all these different things.
Yeah.
And so I've really strived to do that in my life, you know?
Absolutely.
And so I don't know if that helps anybody else out there, but
well, what I think about is a lot of us have these, you know, these areas in our life that are sensitive. We know it pulls us, whether it's a sugar addiction,
sure,
or whether it's, you know, anger or shame or whatever that is.
whatever it is.
Whatever it is. And I think sometimes the reason we don't lock them up is we're not aware of them.
Yeah, that could be true too.
And I think sometimes we need to take a good look and say, what is it in me that I'm holding on to that's stopping that blessing?
Yep. Good.
And I think the more we can become aware, not out of like, oh, you should feel bad about yourself, but you know what, I struggle here, and be just so honest and real about that. And that way we can start to work with our thoughts around it. If we can't develop the maturity enough to look into our strengths and our weaknesses, then we can never get to that place that we're striving to, that we wish we could get to. We don't even know what's holding us back. So we really have to get to that place where we can be just totally real and raw with ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a transparent example, you know, so like on the internet, right? And you become more successful, you start to have other people that approach you, right?
Yeah.
And so with my wife, I said, look, I never want to have anybody else that approaches me or that has any access to me that you don't know about. Like I would never say anything to you as I wouldn't say to any other woman out there, right? Or anything else. So I want 100% transparency. So here's every login to every email address I have. Here's my cell phone. Here's everything. Like, so I want you to spot check me at all times. Like I am demanding that you do that so that everything is on the uppity up and there's no hidden anything, because that way I never fall into a temptation of some craziness.
Yeah.
Just because no intent of doing that, but just so I have a locker in my life that it doesn't happen for me or for you or for anything else, that we're transparent in our marriage.
Yes. Okay.
You know, it's such a release for both of us that it's like, I can pick up her phone and look at anything I want, whoever, doesn't matter to me. And the same, you know, it's like, here it is. I don't delete anything. She sees it, you know, whatever. Right. But that way, that's a locker scenario for me and for her, in my opinion. Right. So that way, we're really in love with each other, you know, and that's what we want. But I use that as an example, but there's a lot of things that way that we can do. It just alleviates any temptation.
It really does. And that comes with maturity.
Agreed.
I think a lot of times we are immature children wanting to get mature blessings.
Oh, good.
And we can't do that. Like, I mean, we wouldn't let our 16-year-old who just got their license drive a brand new car on the highway without any, like, we have to develop that maturity. And I think we're constantly being challenged. I mean, there's no more challenging time than for us right now. I mean, whether you're listening to this later or watching this later, you know, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, still in the middle. And it's almost like we have to go through this. We have to mature. And it's bringing out the best and unfortunately the worst in us, you know? And so this is a great time to just sit with ourselves and say, what is it that I don't like? I don't like that this is coming out. I don't like that this has captivity over me. And the church has to grow up. We have to do this. And I'm a Christian, and I've always just, for me and my experience, I grew up, you know, in the Southern Baptist Church, and I was, you know, you go to church on Sundays, you sing some songs, you make sure you give a gift, and then you know, tell someone about Jesus. But how we are being pushed right now is a totally new thing. We're being pushed as individuals. We're being pushed as Christians. We're being pushed out into the world and to show up in a brand new way. So, and I feel like this is a time, I don't know if you feel this way, Bart, or not, but this is a time when we can either like cruise to the top or we can get crushed at the bottom.
Amen. You bet. And that's everything from race. It's everything we see it in all sorts of
Everything's coming
categories.
out. There's a shaking. Everything's
There's
coming out.
big time shaking. And I think that's where we've really got to be careful. We've really got to look at who we really are, and what we really want to become. And, I get called out because of my following on social platforms, over a lot of different things. And this is what I always say. I want to pick the battles that I can win.
Mm.
I don't pick any other battle that I can't win, and I'm not going to get involved in, right? Because there's certain things you're just not going to win in life.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You have to realize that. But there's no sense in jumping into a battle that you're going to get beat up in.
And I think you have to wonder why you want to jump into that battle.
That's right. And what the intention is that you're jumping into the battle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I had my opinion on COVID. I have my opinion on the race, the Black Lives Matter. I have all sorts of opinions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so does everybody else. But the main thing is if I can discuss it, not fight about it. Because I'm not trying to say I'm right or wrong.
Right.
I'm open, 100% open.
Yeah.
But I think that it has to be discussed, right? Not let's riot about it, or I didn't get my way, so I'm going to throw a tantrum about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, okay, what would God really want here? What is God saying right here? Does God love all of us? You bet. Does he love white people more than he loves black people? No, not on any scripture I've ever seen.
No.
Does he love the Hispanics more? Does he no. Like I don't see any of that, right? So
it's almost like we can all just sit at the table.
Yeah, we can, and we should.
We should. There's a seat for all of us. And I think the problem is, but I know we're probably going all over the place here, but I think the problem is when people see this banquet table.
Yeah.
And then they're frustrated at God. God, why is it I have to struggle? Why is it they get to eat here? Why do I have to struggle? Why do I have to struggle as a mom with my kids? Why do I have to struggle in my marriage? Why do I have to struggle with my finances or with my weight or whatever? And God's saying, honey, there's a seat right here. Yeah. There's a seat right here. If we know what we are entitled to as heirs of God, as his children, we are the heirs. Like,
that's right.
The
You're a God.
Abraham and generations that followed him and all his descendants. So if we understand what we're entitled to, we can get our butt off the floor complaining, and we can say, oh, I can sit here. I can just lean in. Lean into God and find out what all I have access to.
Amen.
When I get the vision, when I break it down, when I understand it's accessible. But I believe sometimes that's just hard to imagine, really, that we have a seat there. But I'm telling everyone who's listening, and I know you are too, Bart, that yes, there's a seat at the table.
That's right. There is more than a seat at the table. There is an abundance of seats at the table because people aren't standing up and taking their seat.
Right.
And I find the biggest thing is we want to cry in our own misery. And we want other people to feel pity of our own misery.
Dude, I was there.
We all have been.
I was there.
We all have been.
Someone to rescue me, give me some money, help me get my life straight. And God's like, get up.
Yep. That's right. And I'll tell you, when we open our eyes up to he wants this for us, he is going to hold our hand through it, and he will align the people for us, then all of a sudden it just starts to happen for us.
It does.
It does. And it's amazing. So.
Yeah, it does. Bart, you are such a blessing. Thank you so much.
Vice versa. How else can I bless you guys, your listeners? I'm happy to help. What can I say?
Yeah. Okay. So how can people get more of the $1 Billion Cowboy? Tell us.
So on my profiles, really, I don't talk a lot of religion. I do once in a while. But I do talk a lot about business. My ideal world today is I consult high entrepreneurial couples and individuals. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite thing to do on how to grow their empires and what they're missing in their empire. And right now I honestly have I couldn't even dream of a better clientele than I have right now.
God just brings us the perfect people.
I the most amazing humans, and they're blessing the world and they're giving back to the world on big scales, and it's awesome. But that's what I love to do. But I also team rope, and I put a lot of stuff on my content about team roping, bodybuilding. I'm doing a photo shoot with my wife and my family in 3 months. So we're all in prep right now. We're doing a full-on photo shoot for that, just for fun. But I have a lot of that kind of stuff. So I'm lucky to be friends with a lot of high-end, amazing people that I post on there once in a while. But however you want to contact, you're welcome to reach out. But I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
Yeah,
the
it
main thing
does.
that
It
I
does.
do.
Follow. Okay, so people want to follow you on Instagram, Facebook.
Sure.
Oh,
Instagram's great. Facebook, they're welcome to. I think I'm pretty full on Facebook as far as
yeah,
personal friends
yeah,
go, but
yeah.
like Instagram's wide open. I have a business page you can go follow on if you want to.
Okay.
But the main thing that I've learned is I own the largest online makeup schools in several categories. So I'm big into coaching on how to build schools out, and I'm big on the e-commerce space. So kind of those both worlds. So if you're in those worlds and you need help on that,
Fantastic.
and high ticket sales, that's really it.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bart. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. If there's anything else, let me know. And thank you. It's an honor to be on here and talk about some of the things we've talked about. And I hope they helped.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much.
You bet.